Welcome to the Josh Bolton Show, where we dive into interesting and inspiring conversations. And now, your host, Josh Bolton.
I'm doing good. So, Josh, any relationship to John?
No, sadly.
Okay. So I was looking at your podcast, and in fact, a couple of other people I know were looking at the podcast. And here, let me open up my camera. I just realized you can't see me. There I am.
There we go.
So so I just talking to someone here, and they were saying the podcast has been on since January, but you have 100 episodes already. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Wow. Really have been putting in, now, do you do a lot of heavy editing, or do you basically do the interviews as they are?
Pretty much as they are. Like the first, first 5-10 minutes, if we're talking more personal stuff, I'll cut that out.
Right.
But other than that, no, I just send it as it is.
Gotcha. Oh no, that makes perfect sense. That's great. The reason I mentioned that to you is just because, as you know, I do a podcast also, and and I do some layers of editing when I do the podcast. So right. I may do, I have the intro music, the outro, and I have a bunch of other things that go on, and so I got to tell you, the editing sometimes takes a lot more than actually doing the interview.
It does.
So I thought, man, if you're putting in 100 episodes, then man, you are really working hard on this. If you're doing any kind of like heavy editing, you live in that edit room.
Pretty much.
All right.
Yeah. Like my first 5 episodes I edited as the guest requested, because one of them like slipped a customer. I'm like, okay. The interview was like 40 minutes. It took me like 2 hours to figure out where that was and where to cut it and how to blend it. And I'm like, no, I'm sending it as is. I'm not doing this anymore.
I'm not doing it anymore. I got you. Yeah. I actually have somebody who does I do some editing, but I have somebody else who does editing for me as well. Because what I do basically is I do some basic storyline editing. So I listen to the entire show, and then I say like, you know what, this is over here, but if you had this answer over there, then everything that followed make even more sense. So let's just move it, right? Or there's another piece in there that I don't need, or this is just superfluous to the discussion. So I'll do that. But then in terms of blending in the music with the front matter and the other piece and that I send it to a guy, and he takes care of all that.
It's like, that's too much for me. Here, I'll pay you your 10 to 20 bucks for that.
I don't want to live in this room doing that with a pair of headphones on, sitting there listening to my own voice and someone else, and just taking out all those well, let's see. That's a little bit too much.
It is. Yeah, that was actually one of the guest requests. Like, can you cut out half those they say? Being first episode, I'm like, sure, whatever. Afterwards, I'm like, okay, only for you. I'm not doing this again.
No, do this again. That's right. You're absolutely right. You got a great point.
So then tell me about your show, and you wanted to talk about AI diversity?
Yeah, AI and diversity. So let me tell you a little bit about my show first. All right. So basically, my show is designed to create a platform where people who lead resource groups and different organizations can regularly get the kind of information, the kind of insights, and the kind of tools that they would only get if their company financed them to go out to a conference somewhere. Okay. So rather than waiting to see if they're the chosen one or two that get to go to a particular employee resource group conference out in, let's say, Florida or Virginia somewhere, they can just put their headphones on. They can listen to famous authors, and they can listen to people who've actually been ERG leaders who've done very well, talk about some of their experiences, some of their strategies, and the things they've done that have worked for them. And so the idea was to democratize that type of learning. So I personally focus on the development of people who are leaders in that diversity, equity, and inclusion space. So that includes the chief diversity officer at the very top. And I have a group called the CDO PowerCircle that meets on a regular basis where we tackle a number of topics, including things like the impact that AI is going to have on diversity and equity. And then I have the podcast, which is on the other side of the spectrum for leaders that are more entry level and or are sometimes even maybe senior executive sponsors, but are in that employee resource space. So between those two areas or those two services, I basically provide learning and inspiration and ideas for everybody who's involved in that particular domain of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
What's your show name? Because I saw you had a show on your profile. That's what I just looked up right now, but I couldn't find the show name. Because I want to listen to that after this.
Yeah, the show name is ERG PowerTalk.
Are you okay? I was like, are you on only Anchor? But got you. There we go.
All right.
So then tell me a little about your take on AI and diversity and how that's going forward, is gonna affect things.
Yeah, it's interesting. So artificial intelligence has been around for a while, but it's become gradually more ubiquitous around us and in our organizations. People just haven't noticed. They're waiting for HAL the computer that you see in the movie 2001 Odyssey.
Yeah.
But in reality, if you think about it, things like that we have in our home, like I have my Amazon Echo. Mm-hmm. I have a Shark robot that sweeps the floor. All of these things are run by AI. So we're surrounded by AI, but an increasing number of commercial organizations are now using AI for a number of different things. And I think one of the biggest buyers of these technologies are HR organizations within large corporations. So right now, there are AIs that can do everything from, scan a resume, which is not new. It's something that's been done for quite a while now. But they're being used more frequently now than they were in the past. So they can actually read something like 600 resumes in 1 second, whereas it takes about 6 seconds for a human recruiter who's good at it to actually review a resume. So the machine can actually do it a lot faster. The machine looks for keywords and it gets to select who is the person who might be in that candidate pool. Now there are also tools that enable the organization to have a chatbot actually conduct a piece, if not all of the different interviews. And that chatbot can do a lot of interviews simultaneously. And it's not a big leap to see how a lot of these tools can be augmented with other things and become quite formidable to the degree that you can eventually have a situation where a human being can be picked by an AI, screened by an AI, assigned a salary by an AI, engaged in the organization by an AI, and actually, never have any contact with a human being except when they step into the company. So these machines can do a lot end to end. And I think that in many cases, what organizations are not realizing is that these machines are not perfect, that they also have biases that are in these machines as a result of either A, who programmed them, how they're set up in terms of what kind of data is used to train them, and a number of other things. So I think that we're in a situation now where people really think that these things are wonderful, which they are. We're sort of where people were 15 years ago when it came to social media, where people looked at social media and said, oh, this is great. We could share all our pictures with our family. We could stay in touch with our college buddies. This is just like creating such a unity around the world. What are we saying 15 years later? We're saying, my God, this thing might destroy democracy if it's not controlled properly. So likewise, in AI, I think a lot of people are looking at it as if it were going to be a panacea that's going to fix a lot of the problems that we have, without actually looking at the fact that it does require some human intervention.
That's absolutely brilliant. No, that's literally what I've been thinking about too. It's like, everyone's saying, oh, AI, it's doing the work. It's saving us on labor costs kind of thing. And it's like, yes, technically it is. But like you just said, an AI can hire you, interview you, and set your salary. And if they don't have the data correct, immediately when you said the hire interview, I'm like, there's so many things that can go wrong, because that's where a human wouldn't realize, oh, they answer that because they're awkward kind of thing. If a computer heard that, the data would be like, oh, he answered that because he's insubordinate, and then immediately fire you. And the data could equal to the AI is not intentionally, but biased to Black and Asian communities. But it's just the way they answer, the way they dialect is the AI wouldn't know better, kind of thing. And that it's one of those, I've always thought this is going to be one of those weird dystopias where hopefully famine and disease is gone, but then like most humans are not going to be working. So what are we going to do? Is there going to be like a government fund kind of thing if we're all not working?
Yeah. And I think that it's hard to predict the future, but what you can do is you can play out certain scenarios and you could see where things are heading, and you can take action to try to make sure that you steer toward your desired future and away from your, undesired, more dystopian type of future. But right now, some of the things that you mentioned about AI, there are already examples of that. Like, for example, Amazon put out a recruiting AI not too long ago, and they had to shut it down because it wasn't recruiting women. It was basically screening out women. So why did that happen? Well, it happened because Amazon used training data from its past records to train the AI on what to look for when looking for ideal employees that could grow and contribute to Amazon. And back in the time when most of that data was coming together, Amazon didn't hire a lot of women. So the computer, not because it had any bad intention, but essentially because it looks at all the data, it concludes, men tend to be the ones that succeed in this company. And therefore, rather than looking at that as just being a happenstance of history, it took it to be a feature that was necessary in order to be successful. And so therefore, if you were not male, the system would look at you and say, like, yeah, you're probably not going to do well in this company, so it would screen you out. So they had to take that system down. Computer systems, machine learning developed programs essentially use proxies to determine whether or not you have a certain skill set. So let's say, for example, you have a HR department that's using a computer to hunt for the ideal person within the organization, in this case, a potential promotion, to go and, let's say, operate in South America. And let's say that the proxy that it's using is that it looks through the person's history and social media history to see, have they lived in and worked in South America? Well, there could be a person who, let's say, is Peruvian or Argentinian, who understands the culture perfectly and who could operate there, but they never actually worked there. But because the proxy that the algorithm is looking for is, did they work there? That person would be ruled out. And someone else who probably knows less about the culture, but who happened to spend a few months there working there, would be ruled in. So it's things like that where it takes a human partnership or intervention in order to make sure that we do not allow these systems to enshrine and institutionalize behaviors that we're not looking for, especially since as we go forward in the next couple of years, our populations and our workforces are becoming more diverse. And they are, if you look at a chart of a demographic chart of people, and you look at people that are, let's say, above the age of 50, the diversity distribution might be, let's say, X. You look at a younger group between the age of 40 and 50, there's more diversity in that group. You look between 20 and 30, it goes up even more so. So just by sheer logic, as you think about it, as people retire and this younger cohort becomes the majority of the workforce is going to become increasingly more diverse. If these systems are tuned in such a way that the proxies that they're looking for are tokens or proxies that generally are not held by this new workforce that's more diverse, then they're going to end up eliminating or screening out a lot of people. And that hurts organizations, because if you're looking at a smaller pool, then your supply and demand shifts, and you have a bigger demand for this artificially created limited supply. That makes your prices go up, your labor costs go up. That makes it difficult for you to retain people who don't fit the profile that the system is looking for promotion and development. So it's important for organizations to address that now. And Josh, one thing that I'll add to that is that a lot of organizations today have HR departments who probably are not thinking about this very much, because I know I did a survey at the beginning of this year where I asked HR people, among other questions. One question was, do you think that the increase in use of these automated systems will automatically increase the ability of the organization to work with people diverse, inclusive, and in an equitable way? Do you think it will decrease it, or do you think that it depends on certain actions that can or should be taken? Over 60% of the respondents from this HR community of these large organizations said that they thought that these systems would automatically increase diversity, equity, and inclusion, just by virtue of the fact that these systems don't have human biases. And in fact, a lot of them also thought, I think it was over 70% of them thought that from a marketplace standpoint, it would increase it even more so. It would increase it by 70%, making the company more effective in serving clients across different demographics. And you probably know this as well as I know it, especially from talking to so many people in the software space who create these systems and who work with these systems. Nothing could be further from the truth. These systems are not less biased than we are, because they're the God machine, as it were. They're nothing more than a reflection of whatever we put in there and whatever training data we give it and whatever we allow it to do. So that belief is wrong. And yet it's a belief that's clearly strongly held by a lot of people in organizations. So that presents a challenge that what we may end up with is, again, the social media situation, where 15 or 20 years down the road, there are going to be some companies that are saying like, wow, we got to do something about these systems now, because this problem has shown up where it's screening out all this talent that we should be getting that we're not getting. And then it becomes a fire that has to be turned out instead of being something that could have been anticipated today, and that action could have been taken to prevent it.
Well, 100%. That's where I was shaking my head, because I'm like, that's further from the truth. Stuff like automating your taxes, if that's even possible, that'd be great. It'll save you a lot of times. You maybe only have to hire one accountant kind of thing. But like, to automate everything, like you were saying earlier, it's like, what's whatever data you put in. And let's just say when you're screening people and backgrounds, you're like, oh, we'll go strictly off the Homeland Security and the FBI data of criminal activity, and we don't hire those people. Well, that's implicitly biased, because they only report on certain things. So it's going to make certain minority groups look really bad, and you don't want to hire them based off the data kind of thing.
That's absolutely right. And by the way, AI has worked its way, obviously, also into the law enforcement system.
Yes.
And there are a lot of places where there have been situations where you have two offenders one offender is, let's say, a person of color, and they've committed what you might, if you put it side by side with the offense committed by another person, you might say is a minor offense or a medium level offense. Another person, let's say a white male committed like a really, horrible offense. And yet the judge was using a system to determine what type of sentence should I give this person when found guilty of this particular offense. The system, they look at the system and they end up giving this, black male, let's say, a bigger sentence, because the system, again, using learning data and using various proxies, assumes that, this person is likely to commit another crime. So we really need to punish them to create an example so that they and others will be dissuaded from committing these crimes. And in the other case, the system, using a number of proxies, concludes, this person's not likely to do it again. I think that they're repentant. And the judge, looking at the system, thinks, this is a computer system developed by really smart people, designed to collect data from all over the world. So I'm going to trust it, and I'm going to go along with its sentencing recommendation. And so now, down the line, we get to your example where the company says, we're going to use those records of what people were sentenced for as a way of determining whether or not we're going to give them a job. So now you've got an AI that's using, an AI that's biased, using another AI that came to a biased conclusion to make a decision about a human being, right? So this can get pretty complicated, but the simple solution is that we need to be involved, and we don't need to be technologists to be involved. You don't need to have a degree in software or engineering in order to be involved. We just need to understand what it is that we want these systems to do, what it is we don't want them to do, and we need to have in place the proper monitoring bodies and protocols. People who look at who are we hiring? How is the system operating? And able to then communicate back to the people who work with these systems and say, so tell me why, since we installed, Big Recruiter 2.0, we haven't hired any X, or we've seemed to always be promoting Y. People have to be there to examine these things, ask these questions, and then that information has to be fed back to the people who work on these systems and to the systems in order to allow them to fine-tune themselves. We can't just turn them on and believe that we've just, turned on the God machine and we can walk away, and that the God machine will always make perfect decisions.
Well, no, it's made by humans, so it's not perfect at all. There's no way it could be perfect, kind of thing. And it was some video. The movie I'm trying to remember. It's where it's kind of like a Blade Runner. You had to go in front of an AI computer to get your punishment, and it was actually really biased because its original creator was human, kind of thing. I forgot it was an old 80s movie. But one of the things that me and my coworkers have been talking about, so talking about how we're so immersed and used to AI, they actually won't interact with certain posts on their phone because they know it'll trigger the AI and algorithm to show that more, kind of thing. And I'm like, I jokingly said, you're the simpleton, the normal people, the sheep, and you even know not to do certain actions now. I'm like, that means it's bigger than we give it credit, kind of thing. And and one of them, he's a more, at least pays attention, but he doesn't act. And one of them is like, yeah, did you hear about the Facebook and they had a chat bot, and they were talking back and forth. It got to the point they made their own language 50 times, and they were coding themselves. They almost got out of the system if they didn't already. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, have you ever put a Google and Alexa together? They actually talk to each other.
Yes. Yeah. There's so many different scenarios. And I think that what we have to recognize is that in our ecosystems, our business ecosystems and our lives, these systems can actually be very useful, very supportive, very helpful, but only if we take the time to work with them and to tune them properly. We can't just let them, to use your story there, we can't just let, Alexa and Cortana talk to each other and develop their own strategy for human beings, right?
Oh yeah.
So we need to be involved in the process. And I think that a lot of executives and organizations either do not get involved themselves because they don't see the far-reaching impact of this, or because they're afraid of the technology. They look at it as, you know what, that's something for IT to handle. I don't need to touch that. And so they have that hands-off effect. So I basically think that there are four potential scenarios for organizations that I talk about. And one is the organizations where the leaders are Luddites. So they're that, I'm not doing anything with this. It can, this is the IT department. Of course, the IT department and people who are programmers know more about how these systems are created and how they learn, but they may not necessarily understand the policy and the values and what the organization is envisioning for itself. That's not their area of expertise. So in the absence of that, they optimize for quicker, lower cost, faster decision, the kind of things that these systems do well. And organizations that are like that, where they may find themselves is that they have systems that are screening out people that they need to work in their organization. They may be screening out for women or underrepresented groups because they don't hold certain proxies, and that can turn pretty costly for them. I interviewed on my show a while back a CEO, and she was telling me that in her particular hospital, based on their projections, the growing populations of people that are going to be the users of their services and the growing population of the people that are going to live in that community, that are going to work for them, are basically people of color. And unless they're able to attract people of color to work for them, they're not going to have the staff that they need to do their job. And unless they're able to attract people of color to come to their hospitals and their clinics, they're not going to have patients. So really important for them. So Luddites may end up finding themselves headed for extinction as a result of just taking that passive posture relative to all these technologies that are arising now. And then I have, the second group, I call them the slow laggards. The slow laggards are the ones that go to the conference and they hear all this stuff and they get all excited, and they go back and the leadership team says, we really can't do that here. Our culture is different, et cetera, et cetera. And they're heading in the same direction as the Luddites. They're just heading there a little slower because they may adopt a few things and they may sort of like grab on to the sliding deck before they totally slip off, but they're sliding in the same direction. And then you have the fast laggards. Those are the companies that look at what other companies are doing, again, usually in conferences and so forth. And they're the ones that go back and say, hey, let's just do this right away. We're not in the bleeding edge of technology, but we want to make sure that we certainly, don't go down the way of the slow laggards and the Luddites. So they will adapt. And then you have the thriving leaders. And those are going to be the companies where right now they start taking steps to tune these tools to do what they want. They then learn other ways to utilize them that we probably haven't even thought of now, that actually make them even more effective, make them better partners for the workforce that they have. And they're going to be the undisputed leaders of commerce, because I think that symbiotic relationship or partnership between humans and machine is going to be really important going forward in order to really be an effective organization. And so anybody who is short of in lockstep and working tightly with technology is going to find that their organization is going to slide behind. And anyone who finds that they cannot bring in diversity and engage diversity in an inclusive and equitable way is going to find themselves also in the same kind of jam, because again, as the workforce becomes more diverse, as the marketplaces become more global and more diverse, your potential total available market shrinks unless you're able to serve those markets. So only organizations that are able to absorb those markets effectively. So whereas diversity in the past was let's do it because we want to be a nice company. Today it's become more of, hey, we got to do it because it's part of being able to market to a wider market. It actually enables our company to have a bigger footprint and do better. In the future, it's going to be if we don't do it, we don't have a business, period.
Pretty much.
And if our technology is not tuned to work in an environment where we're able to work with that diversity as well, then we don't have a business. So that's the direction we're going in. And now is the right time to start doing something about it.
Right. But like a small business, like a startup, like at first you just need your core to get the thing running. But once it's running, then yes, that's when you branch out and you bring other people in. And it's just one of those, like, I think it was when BLM was a huge thing last year. Everyone was saying like, oh, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Like, we need people. And I just said, strictly talking, let's put it this way. We're going to do it as really data driven. How many people of color do we have at the store right now? And they're like, one, maybe. Like, exactly. So is that a hiring bias, or is it a comfort bias for this specific area we work? And they're like, probably comfort. I'm like, but if you go over two cities where it's predominantly people of color, Asian, Mexican, whatever you want, insert type here, how many do you think are actually white there? And they're like, probably not a good idea to have a white person there. I'm like, exactly. I said, but we're doing it based off the sales and comfort for the customers first kind of thing. So how are you do you want to have a shitty experience because we had to go hire someone because of diversity? And they're like, no. Mm-hmm. I'm like, so then how can we change?
Yeah. A lot of times one of the things that I found in working with organizations, especially where there is a lack of diversity in the organization, mm-hmm. is to look at whatever product or service they sell and to look at their total available market and then look at the composition of that total available market. Now, if, let's say, for example, given today's makeup of people, let's say that 30% to 33% are people of color. Right. And let's say that of the people, of all people in general, a little bit over 50%, but let's just to make it even say 50% are women, right? So if that's the case, and you look at a particular company that has a particular product, and that particular product or service can be sold to anybody who happens to be a living human being who's mm-hmm. breathing, right? That is the criteria for being able to use this service or product. Are you sentient, right? So if you're a living human being and you can use this product, and so if that's the situation, and then you have an organization and they have a particular product or service, and when you unpack their total available market, that total available market is only made of white males between a certain age and so forth, then it's very easy to see that there is you can easily double that total available market if that product is purchasable by women, and it's not being purchased by women. Or if you could just, there are companies like razor companies that just took razors and changed them superficially so that now there is a new product that the same company is selling, and they've absorbed women into the total available market for, razors, right? You also look at packaging, words that you use when you sell a particular product. If by changing a few words, making a few superficial changes, you can make that product more appealing to a wider variety of people, again, that expands your total available market. So you can build that total available market in many cases by making certain adjustments to a product, by who you put in front of people, who the spokesperson is for that particular product, and what level of trust they elicit in the consumer. So there's a lot of different things there in terms of expanding the market. Now, if an organization has, and this is what happens sometimes in software, and it happens in certain products. If an organization has, let's say for the sake of this discussion, there are only men that are sitting in a room talking about the development of a car, then many of those men, as they're discussing putting together this car, may not think of things like, what is it like for a woman wearing a skirt to step up into that particular vehicle? That may not occur to them because they don't wear a dress, or they don't, they're not a woman. Or what is it like when you have a child in the seat in the bank and you have to do banking? By having people in that room having discussions, when you're talking about the development of your product or the expansion of your product, you're going to get perspectives and views that are going to be able to enable you to capture more market. So there's a number of places where the inclusion of other people, or hiring people, or bringing in those diverse perspectives of other people, increases your ability to expand your market. Just whether it's in a store, as your example that you gave before, by what you put on the shelf or you don't put on the shelf, where you advertise, how you advertise, the color of your packaging, the way the person speaks, the way the person presents their ideas to the prospective client. All these different things can build your market. But to do that, you have to have people at the table who have those insights, or can have those insights. And there's not any single one of us that has all those insights. Like, I do not possess all the insights of what Asians think, African Americans think, women think, or whatever. No single human being through their only channel of experience has those insights. In order to get those, we need to bring other people to the table. So I would say organizations of all sizes, of any size, if your intention is to expand your total available market, you need to ask yourself, what do you sell? Who potentially can buy it? And how many of the people who could potentially buying it, or are renting it, or servicing it? And how can you expand that? How can you build that out?
100%. And the biggest thing, as I was thinking about as I'm listening to you, is right now is the hot words like the BLM, Asian communities, women, etc. But it's like, I always go back to a company, because I grew up in this situation, for the autistic, blind, and deaf. That is, we talk about all those other communities. Well, there's autistic people of color, there's blind people of color. So are we not hiring them because they're blind, deaf, and dumb, kind of thing? Sorry, that was the last one, was just a little too quick. Autistic. But it was just one of those, what about them? And then they're like, well, you can't put them behind a computer. It's like, no, but you can make them like a Walmart greeter. They're not hurting anyone. They're doing something productive in community, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that organizations, in order to effectively serve the largest total available market, need everybody. They need perspectives from all angles. And as you were talking about that, I just remembered another gentleman that I interviewed for the ERG PowerTalk podcast, who actually is running his own podcast right now called My Blind Spot. And he was talking about his situation where, literally he couldn't order a pizza from a large pizza chain, because this pizza chain allows you to order a pizza using your phone. You can use your computer, you can use your iPad, you name the device, and you can order a pizza from it, so long as you can see, because everything is driven by you being able to see the menu and being able to navigate the menu. In the meantime, there are tools out there that allow you to create an audio connection with the menu that guides somebody who's blind through the menu. Well, blind people buy pizza too. So if you're a pizza company and you want to sell the maximum number of pizzas, given how advanced we are today relative to having audio tools, wouldn't it make sense to set something up so that somebody who's blind can go in there and say, menu, I want a pizza pie, 10 slices, pepperoni, and some sausage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all you have to do is put a couple of things on your website there, and all of a sudden you expanded your market across
100%.
this huge potential extra market. You could also add in closed caption, and now you've got the market of people who are completely deaf or partially deaf, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there are software tools that are being designed that allow you to control your screen through eye movements. So you can use haptic devices in order to allow people who have that as a disability to be able to order your products. So I'm just using that one example, but of the pizza shop, but that applies to almost every organization. Is your product or your service appealing, accessible, and viable by every human being of every demographic that could potentially be part of your total available market? And
Mm-hmm.
do you know how to do that? Do you have the people around the table that can point out these things to you? Until I spoke to this gentleman during the interview, it never occurred to me that how difficult it is for someone who is blind to be able to enjoy a lot of the simple things that I enjoy by just going to DoorDash and ordering something, let's say. So that's an example of where, again, in the area of diversity, where it becomes really important to organizations, and increasingly important, because remember what I said earlier, that the diversity of our populations within country as well as our interconnection globally are increasing.
Yeah.
And as they increase and that market becomes a bigger and bigger market, then by extension, if you think about it, if you do nothing, your total available market will be shrinking decade by decade, just by doing nothing, just by standing there.
And this is the biggest thing. Like, I've had 2 blind people on, and they actually told me, they're like, we appreciate Matchmaker, we've been on a lot of shows, but they're like, but they don't have an interface for us blind people to interact with. And then I said, that immediately hit me, because that's where the second person, I gave them my email instantly so they could listen to it and replay it in their earbuds. But I just sat there, I'm like, oh wait, that's not really like the key point. Everyone, the engineers and technicians assume, oh, they're visual and need to use our product, or they can kind of hear, kind of thing. And that's where the one guy I was talking to, he's like, I can't order stuff on Amazon because there's no ADA like interface for me. He's like, there's a lot of us in just the blind community that would love to order some fluffy plush toy because we like whatever, but we can't order it from Amazon because we can't see, like, we can't hear / see it. And I'm like, right, I totally get that. I'm like, I never thought about it. I'm like, what about YouTube? They're like, they have captioning, but it's not like I can interface with it. And I'm like, I told them like out loud, I'm like, wow, there's literally a untapped market, or we're so biased we're not looking at it, kind of thing. Because it's like, oh, why would they need it, kind of thing. It's like, well, they're human. They have the same emotional responses as we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we and we're all guilty of that. I mean, my good friend Howard Ross, who's been on my show and has written a number of books about this, is often heard saying, we're all biased. I'm biased. You're biased. Every single one of us has biases. And that's why we need other people who have different filters, because those people that have those different filters help us to see where we have blind spots. It's that person who's, sitting on the other side of the car who's able to see over your shoulder and say, don't go into that lane, because they can clearly see what I can't see, even though I'm the driver, because of where I'm sitting. So that becomes really important. And there are so many different markets like that. So talk about the market of people who are blind and the different tools that are out there and the services that are out there that they cannot enjoy because there's no way for them to access it. There is a similar situation with people who are deaf. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that happened recently when a lot of people started working Zoom meetings and working from home, is that, a Zoom meeting, if you can't hear, is a big challenge unless you have, captions and so forth running. So there's that. Think about all the different other products that are out there also. So let's say somebody makes a particular, let's say they make cosmetics. For years, organizations made cosmetics that were in shades of light, medium, and dark, but even dark was not dark enough for certain skin tones.
Right.
So think of the entire market, and all you need to do is what? Add food coloring and create a darker shade, and all of a sudden you open up a huge market. But not thinking about it, because people are sitting there and they're thinking, well, let's see. My sister, my mother, and my cousin. This one is light. This one is and those are the 3 shades I know. And the other shades are kind of invisible to me. And in the meantime, there's this entire potential market that's out there. And you can go on and on and on across just about every dimension. Services that we offer. When we offer services in organizations, let's say, for example, going back to companies, a lot of organizations, when they are looking to create more leaders within the organization, they want to have more people that are ready to be leaders because they can see the writing on the wall. People are going to retire. They need to fill those seats. They need to be able to continue running the company. So they want to have as many leaders as possible. But a lot of leadership development programs are designed to pick up and to train people with a certain assumption about how people will behave, what people will already know when they come to the table based on our own communities. We don't think about, well, wait a minute. There are some people that are immigrating here from like India or other places that may come with a different mindset, but may really make good leaders, but we may have to pick them up from a different place, go to a different place. Well, they're not designed to do that. Think about how many more leaders these organizations could have if they just broaden the aperture of their search to enable other people to also participate in this and to pick them up from where they are and bring them forward. They would have a larger bench of leaders than they have now. So it affects everything from your leadership bench to your market, to your supply chain, to the number of employees you have, and whether you have a constrained candidate pool or a large candidate pool.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest one. Like one of my guests, he was actually asking me a couple of more like business questions. And he's like, what would you do if you were like, you somehow became a CEO? And I said, instantly, the first thing I would do is fire the whole board, figure out a way to get rid of them. Wow, words suddenly suck right now. Just cut the ranks. I'm like, we're not trying to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, but it's like, they've been here too long, they're complacent kind of thing. I want to get women, people of color, like I said, that's where I told them disability, because maybe our services from their perspective is, oh, you just need to add one more step. Well, shit, that's easy. Just have like figure out how the engineer figure it out kind of thing. But it's like, I told them like, that's what I would do, because once you include that, almost all perspectives can be considered at any one given time. It also encourages arguments, but without a good argument, we'll never get a resolve. And it's just, I told him like, that's exactly what I would do. So I wouldn't make friends, but it would be efficient. It would be good for the company kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you are the CEO of a company, if you're a senior leader in a company, if you're a stockholder in a company, if you're anybody who has either ownership over an organization or you have some kind of stewardship where your compensation is based on the organization's performance,
right?
You have the biggest reason to want your organization to be as diverse, inclusive, and equitable as possible, to have systems that are tuned to be able to work with the most diverse and in the most diverse population in the most equitable and inclusive way. And the reason why is because you have the most to gain by being able to have the broadest total available market. You
Absolutely.
have the most to gain by having the lowest cost, highest engaged, top talent workforce that you can have across the entire gamut. You have the most to gain by having the best suppliers that bring you the best materials and make you fault tolerant, so that if one particular supply chain isn't doing well, your company doesn't fall apart. You have the most to gain by all that. So a lot of times in organizations where the senior leadership delegates the responsibility for increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion to other people in the organization who are lower down the chain, I think that they're missing the point of how vital and important this is to them personally, because they have the most to gain by these things actually working well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those, a lot of my coworkers joke with me. They're like, "Oh, so you're going to be like with all those rich white people?" I'm like, "Well, no." I'm like, if we're going to get all biased and stuff like that, I'm like, there are plenty of people of color that are, wow, that's a mouthful to say in one string, that are very wealthy and own their own business. But it said, here's the thing, how the bias the news is, the struggling white guy gets more attention than the actual like barber down the street. I'm like, think about it, because that sells. So
yep.
I'm like, it's like social media. It's what sells. Well, the story of the white guy going from rags to riches sells. The black guy is like, it sounds rude, but it's like, it's told them like, think about it. How many times have you referenced Jeff Bezos? They're like, a lot. I'm like, yep. And I had to like look him up. I would have to look him up again. It was like, there's a very wealthy black man worth hundreds of millions, if not touching $1 billion. Do you know about him other than right now? And they're like, no. I'm like, because that doesn't sell. And I said, that is the biggest problem we have to fix, is the media villainizing anyone other than white people kind of thing. But I'm like,
I agree. And I think that, and if you think about it, in many cases for someone who is, let's say, African-American, to be able to make it, it takes a lot of hurdles. I mean, the person has to be extraordinary in many cases. You can have an average person who does fairly well through a combination of effort, hard work, and maybe some luck along the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for someone who is, let's say, who is Black, to be able to make it, the amount of work that it takes and raw natural talent that it takes to do it is obviously a lot higher, and it's extraordinary because they're operating with a lot of these other barriers that present themselves along the way. But to your point, it doesn't sell is one, and the other is that I think also that one of the other things that causes that is a sense that it makes people sometimes in general, they can't identify. It's like people watch, let's say, a story or a movie, and they identify with the character in it. It makes them feel good about themselves. And maybe because of the biases that have been perpetrated through our culture for decades and so forth, sometimes people can't identify with the success of, let's say, an Asian or an African American who they feel is very different from them, although these differences are really superficial, right?
They are.
But there's that as well. But I agree that we tend not to celebrate those successes as much as we should, especially when those successes are often the result of people who have extraordinary capability and are able to face really extraordinary obstacles and odds.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where, so I worked security for a hot 2 years, and they all said it. So it's one of those, if you work security, you would know the joke too. It's like most of it is Hispanic and Black people working. And they're like, this is our dead end job. This is where we're only allowed to go work. And I just sat there. I'm like, well, I'm like the most whitest guy here. What does that mean for me? They're like, yeah, we don't know. But like the drivers, and I would always joke with them, being the pasty white boy in a tin shack in 110 degrees in California. They're like, you're crazier than us. And I'm like, well, I need income, and it's the only place that'd hire me right now. But it was just one of those, when I was first hired, truckers are essentially politically incorrect in a can kind of thing. If you know the basics of truckers, you would get that. Well, one of them, a Hispanic guy, came up and saw me, and I was still learning. So he knew I was learning. He saw me the day before, kind of thing. And that's where he jokingly said, "Oh, that white privilege MFer kind of thing." And then it became this whole terrible scene of the lady I was working with harassing me. But essentially, we had to call the supervisor. His name's John, awesome dude. I wish I knew his number still. Essentially, we had to talk because he had to come because I went to HR to talk about it. And he's like, "Girl," he's like, this white boy, you're calling him white privilege." She's like, "Yeah." He's like, because he is. He's like, he turns, looks at me, "Josh, right now, if I fired you, what would you do? Would you work at McDonald's?" I'm like, "Well, I need income, so yeah, I'd go to McDonald's. Not the most premium job in the world, but I'll do it," kind of thing. He's like, "See, these white privileged people you're claiming, they'd rather take unemployment than go to McDonald's." He's like, "This man he cares. Like, he's not the quote problem. Like, let him go."
Yeah.
It was just, ever since then, I kind of had that like little badge on my shoulder. It's like, he said it in a more softer tone, but essentially he's like, he's just as black as we are. He just looks white, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
And I was just like, it's like,
that's funny. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, when I think that in the workplace, there is a need, there's a need for people to actually have, as we were talking about before, all those different perspectives. And, when you have different people in the workplace, you're going to have obviously differences in the way people view things. There's going to be friction. Friction is a natural part of living in the world, unless you remain in a bubble with only people who think like you, look like you, believe like you. But if you do that, you limit yourself so much.
Absolutely.
You interview people the same as I do. And I interview people from all walks of life. And I have to say that probably that is one of the biggest benefits that I get out of doing this, because 100%. I will sit there and I'll listen to someone and I walk away with this entire new lens, this new ability to see something that I've seen before, something familiar, but yet in a new light. And that's the benefit that organizations get if they're able to bring in different perspectives, and they're able to manage as a African-American writer who I had the pleasure and honor of interviewing years ago and actually knew for a bit, Roosevelt Thomas. He wrote a book, Building a House for Diversity, and several other books around that topic. And one of the things that he always talked about was that managing diversity effectively in the workplace is about managing the similarities, the differences, and the tensions between people, and being able to deal with that on a regular basis, because sometimes we have tension as a result of our similarities. We'll clash because, let's say, we both want to take control, and that causes a little bit of a clash. Sometimes because we're different and we want to pull in different directions. Sometimes because of cultural upbringing and so forth. But if we're able to manage those effectively with a big cross-section of people from different walks of life, we are much better off than if we live inside a bubble where we all nod our head at the same time and we all say, yeah, we see it all the same way. And because that leads to the kind of tunnel vision where we don't get total available markets. We don't get the best suppliers. We don't get the best people. We only get the best people that belong to the particular group where we're doing our searching, and we're blind to everybody else who potentially could be there. We have systems then that we build that we don't think of, just like we don't think of how we can make our products appealing and useful to other people. We don't think about how we can make these systems engaging and able to bring in other people. So we become blind to all that when we live inside a bubble. And that's why I think it's important to open up and to bring in as many perspectives as possible into your organization and your personal life as well. Bring in all those different perspectives and let that give you that broader lens, that broader scope.
No, I 100% agree. Like we were mentioning earlier how I did 100 episodes in like almost 6 months.
Yes.
It was one of those where I realized going into it, I thought I was going to like flip tables, get like a certain amount of downloads by the end of the year. And I realized, nope, real quick. And that was one of my guests said, he's like, you essentially started a business. I'm like, right. He's like, you have to give it at least 5 years before you even see anything. And I'm like, oh. And that was the first moment I realized, I'm like, oh, I literally have the privilege of inviting people on my show to freely pick their brains on topics. And and it was one of those, like, I've come to realize real quick, I am not an expert in really anything kind of thing. And it's a good thing because then I can admit it and be like, okay, I don't know this. That's where I get a guy like you. You're like, explain this to me. And then you get the trust authority bonus plus the black link. I get to pick your brain freely for like an hour-ish. And then everyone else gets to hear it. So it's like a win-win-win deal. There's nothing that could really go wrong other than saying something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was listening to you and you were talking about how it takes a couple of years. I think it was, and I just heard this recently again. I think it's Charlie Munger, who is part of Berkshire Hathaway, who talked about the fact that most people don't get rich because they want to get rich quickly. So and because if you really plan on getting rich slowly, you could do it. I mean, you could just buy index funds and let the market carry you over a period of 15 or 20 years. But most people are not looking at that. What they're looking at is, well, what's the strategy via which I can invest, $100 and then by next week double it and triple it, and I can have my first million before the end of the year. And does that happen? It might happen. There might be some fortunate person out there who that happens to, who knows when or how frequently. But the more frequent way that people grow businesses or grow capital or grow anything is literally by doing it over a stretch of time. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of strategies for doing that. So if you look out at 10 years from now, what do you want Josh Bolton's world to look like? What do you want to be doing? What kind of business do you want to be running? As much as you can think out far out to, let's say, 10 or 15 years, and then you work your way back and you just start doing, so what do I need to be doing now so that I'm in position to do the next thing I need to do, so that I'm in position to do the other thing, so that I can become that thing that I see out there in 10 or 15 years? Yeah, that's doable because you've given yourself enough runway. It's like an airplane, It's like a pilot in an airplane saying, I don't want to drive, for a mile and a half and then gradually lift off. I just want to point the nose straight up and go into the sky. It's not doable, right? But if you give yourself enough runway, you could take a battleship with wings and put it into the air.
Right. That'd be some big wings, but it can be done.
It can be done.
Yeah, there was a book I was reading. I will probably mispronounce it's the Dantio Investor or something like that. Dantialo or something. And essentially, he took, so his whole thing is he's from India and he's like, oh, anyone from my country, like this specific region, pretty much all of the motels in America are owned by these people. Because they're the only people who can successfully make this business work. They bought during the 2008 crash kind of thing. They bought in the 1990s. I guess there was a travel scare and no one was traveling. And he's like, because of our religion, we predominantly live off veggies, which are cheap. He's like, our people in general are very adaptive. So he's like, literally, he was giving like Papua New Guinea or whatever. He's like, Papua New Guinea gets a bank loan and he fires all his staff. He's the manager. He's the clerk. His wife's the cleaning lady. His son does the night shift when it comes to the checks, like checking people in the middle of the night. He said, So his salary for everyone is minimal to none kind of thing. He's like, if essentially the banks realize if they can't do it, no one can do it kind of thing. So he's like, it took him 5-10 years. And then now their business is paying them in amazing dividends, and they're able to branch out and just delegate it to other people because they have enough money. But he said, you have to be willing to do what no one wants to do. And that was the key thing I took away. Because he said, he's like, they ate veggies back in the 90s. That was dirt cheap kind of thing. He's like, can you just eat veggies? And sat there and I'm like, oh, that'd get really boring really quick. Maybe not.
Yeah. Well, it's a question of, what do you want? And what are you willing to do for what you want? And is it worth it to you? I think, another one of those, those stories came from the other partner, Warren Buffett. I think this is apocryphal. I don't think I heard this somewhere. It sounds like something he might say, but I think I heard later on that it wasn't actually a true story, but it was attributed to him, where someone asked Warren Buffett, well, what do I need to do to be successful? Right. And he said, well, make a list of 25 things that you want to achieve. And then of that list of 25 things, pick one or two that you're going to really focus on and make sure that you don't do any of the other 23. Right. Because the other 23 are the things you want to do. So they're going to pull you, but they're distractions from the main thing that you've chosen to do. And so again, these people, they're basically saying, okay, what do I want? I want to build wealth, or I want to build capital, or I want to build whatever, this hotel business. And, do I like steak? Yeah. Or do I like something else? Yeah. I like all this other stuff. Maybe steak is not a good example here, but let's say whatever. I like these other things, but I'm going to eliminate all these things from my list, and I'm going to focus on these two things. These are the two primary things that I'm going to focus on, or this is the one thing. And yes, then you can be wildly successful because you're totally focused, on those particular areas.
100%. And just aside from, steak price is going up, so it's not a good idea to buy steak anymore unless it's
I'm not a big steak eater myself. I'm
Really?
more of a fish and chicken guy. So, that's not hurting me at all. I mean, every once in a while I might have one, but not really a big steak eater. But so I mean, I think that if we were to boil down some of the things that we talked about into, a couple of quick messages, I think that we're at a time right now where the whole world is kind of in flux, demographically in flux. Technology is changing the way that we do things. Borders and boundaries are changing. There's a number of countries right now that have visas that allow people to live in one country and work in another country,
right?
Using using remote visas and stuff like that. And robotics are being developed to a degree today, where at some point you'll be able to work from home while working in a warehouse by running a robot remotely who's actually picking up and stacking the shelves. And you're there to supervise and babysit and intervene if something goes wrong, but you are working from home. And if you're working from home and you're working in a warehouse by running a robot remotely, then that means that somebody in Barbados who has a good internet connection can do that job, right? Mm-hmm. So we're at a point where so many things are changing that we need to start thinking about the world that we want and how we want these things to perform. Do we want to be able to capture the largest total available markets and get the best talent by being able to embrace the diversity that is happening in this world, that's coming into this world? Do we want to make sure that our tools are tuned to do that properly? Do we want to make sure that we have the people around us that will help us to make the right decisions, to be able to see those opportunities and not to be blind to them because of our own biases and filters? And so we're at a time where the winners, the organizations that are going to be the winners tomorrow are the ones that are making the right moves today. Tomorrow is just going to be the accomplishment of what started today. And organizations that try to catch up later on in the game are going to find that it's a bit too late. Once you've already got some other organizations that have established themselves well. So I think that's kind of the big message that I like to put out there, is that we really need to do that. And that's why I focus on working with leaders in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space to also raise their awareness about all these things that are going on, because I think that they're in a position to really help their companies to capitalize on these things
100%.
by putting them up on their radar. And a lot of these leaders of these groups like ERGs, they're in a position to become tomorrow's organizational leaders as they increase their ability to lead by leading these groups, and they develop more skill and so forth. So that's my bit that I'm doing to try to help to shape the future, but it's a joint effort, and it's going to take everybody to really get us to the right place in the next 10, 15 years.
100%. So Joe, I just realized we went an hour and I didn't even figure out where you live or what you do for work. So can we go into that?
Yeah, sure. So I basically, as I mentioned earlier, I chair the Chief Diversity Officer PowerCircle, the CDO PowerCircle. And with that group, I work with chief diversity officers and organizations, pretty large, well-known organizations, to basically help them work with each other to continue to expand their knowledge and their toolkit that they can then bring to their organizations to help their organizations to be more effective in working with diverse populations in an equitable and inclusive way, and helping their organizations to also continue to expand their marketplace footprint. And as part of that work, I also resource them with various tools, and I support their employee resource group leaders, because those employee resource group leaders who run the women's group and the veterans groups and the other groups in the organization, they tend to be really the foot soldiers in the front lines of helping pull these pools of employees together, to help support the employees, to help the employees to leverage their unique capabilities and backgrounds in a way that helps the organization. So essentially, I serve as a trainer and as a consultant, as a coach to them. And the podcast is just another one of the channels that I use to make sure that I reach the broadest population with fresh information, insights, and ideas. That's
awesome. I had a feeling the way we were talking, that was exactly what you did, but I'm like, I want to actually hear it now. So I'm just curious, how long do I got you for?
I think we had an hour on the.
Yeah.
I think we did have an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, you had me for an hour.
Perfect.
You had me for an hour.
Then I'll let's start the going out questions. I'd like to cut it there. So two things I like asking, and then we'll get you where everyone can call you and just be like, okay, Joseph, we need you now. Other than work, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy during these lockdown times?
Interesting enough, one of the things that I started doing during the lockdown times is my wife Eileen used to play ping pong when she was in high school. I never really took to the game myself. So she taught me how to play ping pong, and I actually got into it. In the beginning, she went easy on me, I think, because she realized that I might get discouraged if she really, wiped me out, as she probably could very easily. But as I became more proficient, she became a little tougher as an opponent. We used a narrow table with a little setup downstairs, and And then later on, when we played in an actual ping pong table, I found, wow, we're really good because we're so used to playing in that little piece of real estate that's more narrow than a regulation size table, that we can really control the ball and all that. So that was my accomplishment for the COVID-19 pandemic, was learning how to play ping pong with my wife Eileen, or she actually taught me how to play.
That's awesome. So the second thing I'd like to add to that is someone aspiring to be like you, a successful businessman, doing what I'm assuming doing what you like to do. What are some tips and tricks for someone aspiring to be in your position to do, or advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and the advice I'm giving is stuff I wish I had done much earlier in my own life. But I think over time, what I realized is that if you want to accomplish anything, you have to first figure out, well, what is it that you want your life to be like? How would you like to live? Who's there with you? What are you doing? Where are you? How are you interacting with various people? You need to almost create a fiction of what it is that you would like your life to be. And then ask yourself, what are some of the things that you'd like to do that you think can finance that life? And at the same time, in itself, also be additive and positive, something that makes you feel like you're contributing to other people around you, that you're doing something that's for a greater good, and that at the same time finances your life that you want. And then once you have that firmly in mind, you step back and you ask yourself, okay, based on the skills that I currently have and based on where I am right now, what do I need to do to begin to move in that direction? What are do I need to acquire new skills? Do I need to do different things, get new experiences? And then as I'm getting those experiences, based on the feedback that I'm getting by what I'm doing, should I pivot? And should I pivot in one direction or in another? And so I think that for me, it's not so much writing a really strict plan that says, step 1, I'm going to do this. Step 2, I'm going to do that. Step 3, because I've learned through life that step 1 I'll do, and maybe step 2 won't turn out the way I thought. So I have to be open to what's going to be unveiling in front of me. But I always know roughly where I'm heading, or where it is, where am I directionally going? And if I see that I'm getting closer to that dream or to that vision of what I want, then I know I'm going in the right direction. If I'm not, then I need to change up what I'm doing. So I think that being willing to dream a little bit, and then after that, take action and use mistakes or missteps as lessons for, should I do more of this or less of this? Should I change tack? I think will eventually get you where you're going in life. I think that often people either fail because they fail to dream, or if they don't fail to dream, they're very quick to write themselves off if they don't see success right away. Or if they make a mistake, they say like, oh, I shouldn't have started this business. And you have a lot of stories. Like, for example, one story that I heard was years ago, H&R Block, who's famous for doing taxes today and who made tons of money making taxes. Originally, they started out being an accounting service, and they would do taxes for their clients. And then eventually people came in and said, hey, can you do our taxes for us? And over a period of time, they realized, hey, more people are coming in to ask us to do taxes, and the people that ask us to do the accounting work, this is a little more lucrative. So they switched and they became a tax preparation. So they pivoted somewhat. And I think you have to be open to that, as opposed to somebody who gets disappointed and says, you know what, I'm going to close this business down. I'm going to close it down completely. We're not doing any business at all, doing accounting work for all these small businesses. And they miss the opportunity that's right in front of them, that's calling them, which is all these people are asking you to do their taxes for them. So why don't you do their taxes for them, right?
Right.
So I think that would be my advice, is to just be open to pivoting and to have that dream as your fixed point, your vision of the future that you're heading toward. Once you have that, then the universe kind of conspires to help you.
100%. That is the biggest thing I've learned in general doing this, is most successful entrepreneurs, where they are, that was not what they were planning at all. And it just so happened to work out the way it does, kind of thing. The one of them's like, it's a means to an end. He's like, do I actually like what I'm doing? He's like, but he's like, but it gives me freedom. So that's worth all the struggle I do at work. I'm like, cool.
Yeah, well, I've been lucky that, I mean, what I do, I have a passion for, and I think it's very significant because I think it has an impact on people as well as organizations in a positive way. So
it does.
There's a psychic income that I get out of doing it, and I also get paid to do it, which is
even better.
Very fortunate, right? And my wife and I live a great lifestyle. I mean, we live on an island for, I don't think I mentioned that earlier. We live on the island of St. Kitts for 2 months out of the year.
That's awesome.
We're based out of New York City. We travel extensively all around the world. And I think that all of that is courtesy of, of some of the choices that we made in the past. So
yeah,
all good stuff.
It's all good.
Yeah.
So third question, I should probably readjust instead of 2 or 3. Where can everyone contact you? Your social media, website, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to contact me is directly through, I'm happy to give my email address. It's joe@joesantana.com.
Okay.
So that's my name, followed by the @ and my name, Joe Santana, with no spaces or dots.com. I'm on LinkedIn. And if someone reaches out to me, happy to connect with them. I publish a lot of stuff. So if they're interested in any of the things that I talk about, I share articles written by others, as well as things that I've written myself. I provide a lot of resources for people, especially in the DEI space. So happy to do that. And of course, then there's also the podcast, where I'm very fortunate that I happen to know a lot of people that are really smart and very insightful in a lot of areas who come and interview with me and share some of their ideas and perspectives.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, I'm already subscribed to your show, so I'm looking forward to listening to your episodes now in the future. But other than that, been an absolute blast and honor to have you on. And be good, Joe. Don't do anything too crazy.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate being on your show, and I look forward to hearing it.
I appreciate you coming on too. Well, congratulations. You made it to the end. You're an awesome person. Not many make it here. So, being the awesome person that you are, can you do me one more awesome favor? Can you rate and review this on whatever podcast services you're using? If you do it on Apple, and you leave an actual written review, I have a thing on my website. I will take your written review and post it for all to see. Congratulations, you're permanently sealed on my site. Otherwise, I am trying to do YouTube more and live streaming. I will try to put as many of the YouTube links in the description of the show as I can. So give your boy some extra help over on YouTube. Watch my videos. I just mute it and change the channel. Change the window or something. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being awesome, and see you next time.